Welcome, Rochester, to the Equity Alliance Equity Series. Here's a new episode with a new topic, and I'm so excited that you're able to join us today. My name is Wafal Khalifa, and I work for Destination Medical Center as the Equitable Development Coordinator. And I'm here with my colleague, Chow Matala, and Chow serves City of Rochester as the DEI Director. And just want to share with you all a reminder of where you can find all our previous episodes as we're building this library of resources and best practices and some really helpful information for you and your organization. Please feel free to visit the Destination Medical Center YouTube channel where you will find a folder for the Equity Alliance Equity Series. And we're more than looking forward to know from all of you, how are you utilizing our Equity Alliance Equity Series episodes? If you're sharing them with your network, if you are using them within your organization as a professional development tool, please don't hesitate to let me or Chow know how you're utilizing the Equity Alliance Equity Series episodes. And then I also want to share with you all a reminder in case your organization is interested in joining the Equity Alliance, or if you're looking to receive more information about what does it entail to be a member of the Equity Alliance, feel free to connect with me or my colleague Chow, and we'll be more than happy to meet with you and your organization leader. We do have a presentation that we could share that could provide you some very helpful information about the Equity Alliance and how can your organization become a member, and how you can commit to making organizational change that would lead to equitable results within your organization. And as for the topic today for today's episode, and as you know, we are approaching the National Hispanic Heritage Month that will begin on the 15th of September through the 15th of October. Chow and I sometimes end up planning the episodes to match with some of the topics and some of the national heritage months, whether the Asian episode, the Asian Pacific Islanders episode that we've done a couple months ago, or celebrating Youth Day last month. But really the purpose of tying it together with a national holiday or observing a specific heritage or a specific day, it's to basically be a space to remind all of us that it's not just about celebrating the heritage and the specific community that we'll be talking about. It's an opportunity for you and your organizations to shine a spotlight on the unique voices and experiences. And for this month, it's going to be the voices and experiences of the Hispanic Latino Americans, and to recognize their history, their journeys, and achievements. Latinos today continue to advance communities across country as small business owners, as veterans, teachers, public servants, among many other professions. And from the Minnesota Council on Latino Affairs, what you're seeing here on the screen is some key findings about the Minnesota Latino population. And it is the third largest demographic group in the state of Minnesota. This report, it was published back in October 2021, and the title of the report, it's a portrait of Hispanic Latinx in Minnesota. I encourage all of you to visit the Minnesota Council on Latino Affairs and to check the report in order to understand some of the characteristics and demographic information and socioeconomic information about the Latino community in Minnesota. As the Latino community is growing and as our community is becoming more diverse, and we hope that we provide you with tools and information, regional tools that exist in Minnesota that would be helpful and that would cater to the businesses and the communities that they're looking to access an opportunity to create wealth and generational wealth. So, with no further ado, I want to introduce our presenter for this month, which we're so excited to have. We have Peter Majerle, and Peter is the communications manager for the Latino Economic Development Center. Before joining the Latino Economic Development Center in 2023, Peter spent over 20 years working in journalism and communications in both Minnesota and Costa Rica. In his role as LEDC's communication manager, Peter strives to showcase success stories in Minnesota's Latino community while increasing LEDC's visibility and engagement throughout the state. Welcome, Peter. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for being here to share some very helpful information to the Rochester community.
Thank you, Wafa. It's very much a pleasure and privilege for me to be here talking to all of you. Thank you for the invitation to come and share, and thank you for those that are coming to listen. My name is Peter Majerle. You look at my surname and you think, well, that doesn't sound like it's pronounced right. Well, it's a Slovenian surname with a Brazilian pronunciation done in a Minnesota accent via Costa Rica. So like many of us here in this call, this is a little bit of everything, right? We're all from a bunch of different parts. So as was said, I am the communication director at the Latino Economic Development Center. We have our headquarters here in St. Paul, and we serve the entire state. And I think this might be a time just to share the screen, and should we bust into this presentation? All right, let's see if we can figure this out. Oh, okay. Is this working, folks?
We're not seeing a presentation yet.
All right. Well, let's see here. This is the fun thing about doing these things in a public Zoom setting, is that we just did the dress rehearsal. Everything's great. And then, of course, the time comes. I think maybe we're in a better spot right now.
Yep. Do you see the last tab there on your right, the LEDC presentation, I believe?
I do. And I'm just gonna.
And as you're figuring this out, I want to encourage everyone who's joining us today to utilize the chat to share your questions, comments, or concerns. Feel free to share them in the chat, and we'll have some time towards the end to read your questions. Thank you.
All right, everybody can see this first slide here, creating generational wealth, one entrepreneur at a time.
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everybody. Welcome to learning a little bit more about the Latino population in Minnesota, the Latino Economic Development Center, who we serve and how we do it. So our goal is creating generational wealth, one entrepreneur at a time. And the idea behind that is more finding ways to involve long-term involvement within the community, not for people just to create a job, to have a job, but to create something that can help with the future generations. How do we go about doing this? Well, we've been around for over 20 years, LEDC. Like a lot of things that happen in the Latino community, we came about when a small group of community members were meeting at a church in Minneapolis, the Sagrado Corazón de Jesús, the Sacred Heart of Jesus, which is a Catholic church in South Minneapolis. And they started talking in the mid to late 90s about sort of the spiritual, social, economic development elements that were happening and what was missing within the community. And so they came together and decided that, you know what, we need a place to really concentrate our businesses. So you take a look at the bottom right picture in there. You see the Mercado Central, the central market located on Lake Street in Minneapolis. And that was started in 1999 as sort of what would become the Latino Economic Development Center. So starting in 2003, we formally incorporated, we moved into that building and started our programs, which is developing entrepreneurs, helping our community grow, and helping businesses grow through the classes and workshops that we have, as you see in the upper right. Now, in the middle of that, you'll see some sugar beet workers, a black and white photograph of sugar beet workers in the early 1950s coming in. And on the left side, you see one of our current building on the east side of St. Paul. And the whole cohort of people that you see at the bottom were graduates this May of one of our business classes. It's almost like a mini MBA for Spanish-speaking aspiring entrepreneurs. So I have just a tiny amendment to the population. We saw 345,000 in the previous slide, or that from the Minnesota Compass graphic that was on earlier. It's actually bumped up now to about 370,000, according to the most recent estimates from 2023, which has been almost 150% growth rate since the year 2000. It's really interesting, too, because of the multiple generations throughout the history in Minnesota. Actually, the first documented Latino resident of Minnesota was a musician by the name of Luis Garzon, who in 1886 was touring the country, played in Minneapolis, got ill, and when he recovered from the hospital, he met a Minnesota woman, fell in love, got married, and stayed. So the history here is almost 140 years, 128, 138 years of history. And it's also important to note that of the Latino culture in Minnesota and anywhere is not a monolith, but rather it's a tapestry woven together with all sorts of different languages, dialects, traditions, and cuisines. In fact, to quote Min Compass, it says, "What do we mean when we say Latino? To some, it may conjure a uniform group of people. However, nothing could be further from the truth. Just as there is great diversity among other racial and ethnic groups, variation among Minnesota's Latino residents is significant." And we have folks, now you know, 2/3 about of the Latino population in Minnesota are of Mexican descent, but we still have huge populations from Argentina, Colombia, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, Ecuador. And I think we're going to see folks coming in, Salvador, a lot of folks from there as well. And as economic and social conditions shift throughout the hemisphere, we may end up seeing more Venezuelans, Ecuadorians, and Nicaraguans coming up here now, just due to what's going on within their communities. Take a look at where folks are located, the Latino population. Of course, it makes sense that more are in the Twin Cities metropolitan area than anywhere else. Take a look at number 2 there as far as population numbers. The Rochester metro area is showing over 11,000. And again, this is from the 2020 census. And there were some difficulties with the counting of numbers in that census, and we've grown, populations have shifted since that time. But you take a look there, and these micropolitan areas, I mean, Worthington is fully 1/3 Hispanic folks. You take a look at the map then where folks are located, and again, look at your area of the state around Rochester, Red Wing, Winona, Austin, in the Twin Cities stretching down there. There's a large concentration of new arrivals and long-term residents of the Hispanic community right around in your backyard. So what we do is we serve entrepreneurs and we help aspiring entrepreneurs become the strong business owners that they wish to be. Throughout the course of the United States in 1993, 36%, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, of new businesses were launched by Latinos. That is a huge difference from other populations. It's the highest percentage. It's the highest concentration of business startings from any one demographic community in the country. In Minnesota, we're home to over 12,000 Latino-owned businesses, of which about 9,500 are sole proprietorships. And of the other 1,800, those 1,700 businesses employ nearly 20,000 individuals. So we're looking at almost 10, 11 people per Latino-owned business that has more than one employee. And it's interesting to take a look at that because, like, the number of businesses in Minnesota, Latinos form about 6.5% of Minnesota's population, but only 2.5% of business owners. So in spite of being an entrepreneurially geared community, Minnesota still lags behind a bit in providing the resources and opportunities for that community to get their businesses going and prosper. Now, I take something that's interesting about this picture too. All the pictures of businesses you'll see throughout this presentation are clients of ours of the Latino Economic Development Center. These are folks that we have worked with. This is La Michoacana. They have a restaurant and popsicle shop of these fresh juice Latin-style popsicles located in Blaine, Minnesota. And this is a family affair. You can look at here. We've got dad, we've got the cousins, we've got the daughters, we've got the brother, we've got all sorts of folks of the generation. You can even see Selena in the back. And what's nice about this is that one of the young daughters of the owner actually came up with the design, the interior design of this place, and it is beautiful. It is an absolute trip to go in there. Wonderful food, wonderful people. We'll take a look at some of the programs then that we offer to serve this entrepreneurial community here in Minnesota. Now, one of our three main pillars is business development. And what really starts here in the flyer that you see, this is something we do twice a month. It's called the Workshop on the Structure of Business in Minnesota. And some of the obstacles that you see coming in as a new arrival to any country is maybe I'm not familiar with the language. I probably am not familiar with all of the legal processes and all of the requirements and so forth to open a business. And that's even if I already come with a bit of developed business acumen from my home country. So we like to bring people in on an introductory basis twice a month. It's free. It's always given in Spanish. And we usually have between, say, 15 and 30. That's the limit that we can hold in our auditorium currently. Folks will come in that are aspiring, they're dreaming of becoming a business owner. They're dreaming of becoming an entrepreneur. But as we say in Spanish, entre el dicho y el hecho hay mucho trecho. Between what's said and what's done, there's a lot of ground to run, is how I translate that in English. And so you come in with an idea of that you want to do a business. But then how do you take that idea that you have in your mind or on a piece of paper, on an envelope or a napkin, and turn it into something concrete? Well, throughout our business development, we work with the aspiring entrepreneurs to help them after this class to develop an actual business plan, a solid business plan that they can use to present to anybody that can show what they want to do, how they want to do it, and how it's going to generate income. Additionally to that, we helped with our entrepreneurs. We're developing a kitchen incubator on the east side of St. Paul in another one of our buildings that we're rehabbing and turning into a 30,000 square foot community center. In there, we're going to have 5 commercial kitchens. And it's important to have these commercial kitchens available at a low cost to our entrepreneurs because a lot of our community looks to start maybe a food truck. Everybody's knows somebody that says, man, you've got the greatest recipe in the world. You should totally sell this. And a lot of folks in the Hispanic community, the Latino community, also have people say, man, you need to sell those tortillas. You need to sell those tacos. But in order to be able to have a food truck, the food must be prepared in a commercial kitchen. And to build one on one's own is tens of thousands, up to $120,000. And so we're going to provide for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, kitchen incubator in St. Paul for folks that want to prepare their food for commercial sale within all the proper regulations. And then something else we offer is sort of legal advice. We have workshops on accounting. We talk about all the different elements to run a business. And so we will meet payroll when we have our business classes, which we saw the picture of the graduates earlier in the presentation, that twice a year we have an 11-week intense, this is an online in Spanish course on how to run a business in Minnesota. And so we'd have in-depth lessons on payroll, on different types of insurances, on how to negotiate leases, how to source materials for whatever you're doing, any of the elements that it takes for a successful business to get up and running and to continue running. We also don't just focus on our traditional brick and mortar businesses or services, but our agricultural program is something that is really starting to ramp up a little bit. And it's the 2 main obstacles that we have for farmers, for immigrant farmers or Latino farmers or immigrants of any nationality, is access to markets and access to capital. And now access to capital it's extremely important for all of the aspects of the business because oftentimes folks may not have, as recent arrivals, they might not have the long-term credit history in the United States. They might not have a social security number or the down payment or the collateral to secure a loan to be able to purchase a plot of land, to be able to raise your chickens or whatever that you're looking to do. And so with that, our agricultural program and our business development program use a bit of a different sort of risk analysis that we're going to talk about here in a moment. So with our agricultural program, when we are able to acquire capital for our aspiring farmers or current farmers, we use it to purchase land, machinery. But more importantly than that is we also help them get the access to markets, because in Minnesota, it's the access to land and the access to markets it's probably the biggest barrier. In fact, according to Rodrigo Cala, who is a farmer that works with us, he says, quote, access to land, access to capital, access to markets, language barriers, and climate change are the biggest barriers for Latino farmers. And I'll add to that, that part of the marketing problems as a Latino immigrant farmer may have to do with the language skills, with limited or non-existent English speaking skills, or sometimes those of us that have an accent in English can get different treatment than other folks. And so we help them find those markets and gain access to those markets, steady access. And at the same time, long-term, we provide them with long-term technical assistance. You think of a lot of the folks that are coming up from Latin America here to Minnesota may have experience in farming and in livestock, but this is a much different soil type. It's a much different climate. It's a different market economy up here. And so with our ongoing technical assistance, we help folks navigate that to increase their productivity and to increase the impact that they have on their communities. Our third pillar is our lending department. And this is pretty important because, as you know, unfortunately, money makes the world go round. So we are a community development financial institution. So if you hear anybody throwing out the acronym CDFI, that's what it means. Essentially, this is a federally backed program that we work almost like a credit union, but we don't take deposits. And we focus on a specific community, but we're not limited to that community. And we work towards the betterment of our communities. And so that's what we do with our lending program at LEDC. With that, then we can fund new or existing businesses. We use that to buy supplies, to buy real estate, to payroll, the things that you need to get your business going, marketing efforts, all those sorts of things. And I would like to point out that the gentleman in the photograph here is an Ecuadorian. He's the owner of Cahill Bistro in Edina, sort of an Ecuadorian South American fusion restaurant. He employs 15 individuals, many of whom are from his family, cousins, brothers, sisters. And according to him, he looks like a more muscular version of Super Mario. Why are our services needed? Why do we need this? Well, number one is the language and cultural barriers that come in. And I can't stress that enough, that there are a couple ways to think about that. And language and culture, like we can speak a language, but maybe not be able to communicate effectively. And think about how a robot, like robot speech to text sort of a thing, like it comes out and it lacks the feeling and the empathy and the behind the words communication. So on our staff at LEDC, we currently have, I believe it's representatives from 9 different Spanish-speaking countries. And that includes the United States, by the way. The United States has the second highest Spanish-speaking population in the world with 57 million Spanish speakers, second only to Mexico. So we work in a linguistically and culturally appropriate environment in order to start to break down those barriers. And a lot of that's face-to-face interaction. A lot of that's coming back, repeating, continuing our contact with different communities, different businesses, and just making sure that folks know that we're there to support them. Every culture has their own way of making a deal, right? Every culture has their own way of expressing approval or disapproval. And maybe I don't understand some of those, or I won't pick up on that unless I've been a part of that and I can live it. So with us, we live and we have lived those cultures and languages. And keep in mind too, that, we're looking at the non-monolithic capacities of Latin America, that not even everybody speaks Spanish, of course, right? I mean, Guatemala has 22 national languages, one of which is Spanish. Unfortunately, we don't speak all 22 languages that Guatemala has, but we have enough of a background that we can navigate through those and make sure that we find the appropriate resources for everyone. Secondly, Of course, the need for community and advocacy, this all ties together with our language, with our culture, with the way that we receive people, with the way that we craft our emails. We're bringing them into the fold with us and helping incorporate them into these already established communities throughout the state of Minnesota. At the same time, we also have our, I don't want to call it our lobbying wing because we're not lobbyists here, but we do advocate at a state and federal level for the needs of our community. And of course, the barriers to acquiring capital, which I'd mentioned before, is we need to help folks break that down because somebody might have a wonderful idea on how to start a new hemp woven tapestries, let's say, out in Marshall, Minnesota, but the banks won't lend to them. The traditional banks are unable to lend to them due to their restrictions. We have a little bit more flexibility. So by the fact that we've gone through already and worked with our folks with their technical assistance, with their business plan, internally, we have a different way of analyzing risk and sort of more of a one-on-one personalized level. It's more of like once a person starts working with us, we're all working together for as long as we can. But basically, this is why we do what we do in this photo, these two photos right here. In the left, you see that these are the children of some of those sugar beet workers that we met in an earlier slide. And on the right side, there's a gentleman who could be the child of those children, and he's holding his own daughter. And so this is the sort of generational wealth that we're looking to create so that grandparents, parents, daughters, sons, throughout the generations will have better, greater opportunities, more incorporation into the fabric of our state, and more economic stability. Because as we look at some of the statistics, I believe the poverty rate in Minnesota is somewhere around 7.9%, and it's closer to 15% for Latinos. And again, the unemployment rate is higher within that community than it is for others. And so there are these social inequalities that many other communities face as well that we're trying to address internally. Take a peek at some of the businesses that we serve. We work throughout the state of Minnesota. We have not yet expanded beyond Minnesota's borders, but that is something that we would look into in the sort of medium term. All sorts of industries. In the picture here, you see these beautiful orchids here. This is called bom dia. It's a Brazilian term that means good morning. And it is a Colombian and Venezuelan run health food juice and smoothie spot in the North Loop in Minneapolis. And so this was a very inspiring place because the two owners said, man, we used to get this great acai in our home countries, the superfood fruit berry. And they said, here in Minnesota, we can't get it. We just can't get it. So they went to us. We worked together. They found a way to import the product that they were looking for. They made a beautiful storefront in one of the hippest neighborhoods in Minneapolis, and it's going gangbusters. But we're not just working with food. We're not working with food trucks and restaurants sort of things. I mean, we're working with construction companies. We have a tortilla factory, folks that maybe are trying to sell clothing or do a fashion show. I mean, production agencies, web designers, all sorts of diverse industries, and of course, agriculture, ranging from sole proprietorships to multi-employee companies. Here's a little case study then of a few of the businesses we have. Now, you might recognize this fellow holding the plate in the middle. We invited him to our taco tour event on this Saturday, actually, which is the 14th from 11 to 4 on Lake Street in Minneapolis. Unfortunately, he's campaigning to be the vice president of the United States, so they'll be sending a representative instead. But this is Sol Azteca is a beautiful restaurant that the governor came and saw us and with the grand opening at the end of last year. And this is born out of the nostalgia of the flavors from homes. It's like, man, you guys got a really great recipes. You should totally open a restaurant. Yeah, we should. Well, how do we do this? Like, we've never run a restaurant before. We don't have the money. Who do we call? LEDC. So we helped them put together their plan, get the capital, open the business. Was in an old abandoned Burger King on the edge of St. Cloud. And now they have families working from several different generations in there, bringing in other employees from within the community, not just the Latino community, but from the St. Cloud metropolitan community. And now it is a favorite stop for folks to come and eat up there. Something a little bit different here is AD car detail. Now, this is one of our clients that has actually, this job is born not out of, I mean, you know, I don't know if people are born like, you know what, I think I got a real talent for detailing. But Alan Quiterio, he does have a talent because he developed it over time. He started working at a car dealership as washing cars 20 years ago. And little by little, he worked his way up to the detailing section. He worked for a couple of other detailing companies. And after years of experience, he said, you know what, I'm going to throw my hat in the ring. I got to figure this out. I'm going to do it. And with help from technical assistance and getting access to capital, he was able to open AC Car Detail in Hopkins, Minnesota. Now, at the bottom of this, if you're looking at the slide, there are two different languages on the bottom. They speak English, they speak Spanish, and Alan has also made a point to hire Somali-speaking employees because those three languages best represent the community that they serve. Now, they was with our help with acquiring a place to rent the place to be able to build out his business. We found a place that was near car dealerships, the city of Hopkins, the mail department, the post office. And so there are built-in and multiple schools. And so there are built-in large potential clients all around AD Car Detail that Alan has taken advantage of and has made into his own clients. And it's going well enough that he's thinking about franchising. Alejandro Garcia, this is a small family farm. Alejandro lives in Morris, Minnesota. He and his wife still work at the local creamery, but he wanted to come and start his own little plot of land to start selling at the local farmers market. And so with a little bit of help, he was able to buy a couple of acres right on the edge of town, and he started planting garlic. Now, I'm not a vampire, so when he showed up at the office with these 2 boxes of garlic, I thought, my goodness, I am in heaven. He's looking to purchase more land now to expand it and grow his market from just Morris, Minnesota to more of a southwestern Minnesota region. And then from there, we don't know. We'll see where that goes. So then the question is, how can Rochester and some of the surrounding communities welcome and nurture Latino-owned businesses? Well, the fact that WFI reached out to me is the first step, that you folks are here listening. This is the first step. It's recognizing that the community exists. It's also recognizing that the community faces obstacles that other parts of the population don't. The next step, of course, then taking advantage of organizations like the Latino Economic Development Center and other services throughout the state. You know, there's ACER, there's COPAL, there's CLUES. There are multiple organizations that help deal with many of the different aspects that a recent arrival to Minnesota might deal with. For example, like we don't deal in LEDC with things like helping organize personal hygiene or mental health. But across the street from us, we have CLUES, and they do. And so there's a synergistic relationship among these organizations. And when we can say, okay, well, Fulano came and talked to us, and it's like, you know, we can't really help you, but I know who can. And then we'll send the individual that way. And I think the final one, and this is really important, is to provide follow-up. And I'll give you an example that oftentimes in journalism, where I have my main background, we have what I call parachute journalists. And I'll give you the example from when the verdict of the trial for the murder of George Floyd was taking place outside of the city hall at Hennepin County Center in downtown Minneapolis. There were reporters I was working for USA Today at the time, and there were reporters from all over the country in there waiting. And this was on the first Wednesday of the month. And at 1 o'clock, what happened on the first Wednesday of the month? It's a tornado siren. And so we had CNN and other outlets, ABC out there, like, well, it seems that we're hearing there's a signal that a verdict has been reached. And it's like, no. So you don't know the local landscape the way that a person who lives here and works here does. And so that's number one part of when I talk about parachute journalism. Number two is they leave right after that and they go back to their states or their offices or their cities, and then they continue working. Whereas those of us who are involved and entrenched in the community, we remain here. And so from a journalistic perspective, I always found I have much better success with my sources and my stories when I come back, I said, hey, this is what I wrote. This is what I've done. We're going to come back in touch with you again. And the same thing with LEDC and all of you is that it's great to make a connection, and it's great to know that something exists and to meet a group of people, but it requires multiple touches to come back and to truly to build that trust and to build that trajectory with the community. And so the follow-up is really important. Now, this slide's really easy. Thank you so much. Here's our little contact numbers here. That's the crux of it, folks.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. This was a great presentation. I want to invite everyone to share their questions, comments in the chat. I know there are a couple of comments and questions that I will go over and read to you, but I'm just curious, how much work did LEDC do to retain businesses, especially after the pandemic and COVID? What type of resources LEDC was able to offer?
That's a great question. And the pandemic really it showed the flexibility that LEDC has as an organization. So of course, we're talking about these loans in the business development program. Boom, this pandemic hits, and two main things happened to our community, in the Latino community. One, lots of folks lost their jobs, right? And so they was unable to continue on with the day-to-day lives. And so we shifted from our lending program to providing rental assistance to keep people in their homes. And then number two is the COVID itself. And so we partnered with the Minnesota Department of Health during that time to really come up with a holistic, integral campaign of information and resources, vaccinations, everything, again, culturally and linguistically appropriate for the community.
Thank you. And I do see Julie unmuted yourself. Do you have a question or a comment? Okay. Julie works for SBDC, and she is one of the best community connectors that we have here in Rochester. She works with entrepreneurs and businesses where she offers a wealth of resources and information to help businesses and entrepreneurs. She connects us all the time with Spanish-speaking communities that we have in Rochester. So I welcome you to this space, Julie, and if you want to share any comment or if you have any question for Peter.
Yes. Hi, Peter. You and I connected on LinkedIn.
Yes.
Yes. And we're going to be talking soon. So that was the first step, reaching out.
Right on.
I'll be up there September 23rd, visiting all of those little communities, me and Maribel from the SBA. So I hope to see you then. And I'm also going to be visiting all the little locations that you talked about, Acer and all those places.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. There is a question from Al. And as I'm about to read the question, there is another question that comes up, so I gotta scroll quickly. Al's question: does LEDC work with financial institutions to provide loan resources?
We do. We work with financial institutions to acquire the loan funds that we then disperse amongst our clients.
I was really excited when you shared earlier about the CDFI and how it could be used for like operational needs, like purchasing supplies. And often when we see grants or opportunities or loan funding, it's really tied to a capital improvement, and businesses get stuck sometimes and they need extra help. So for the awesome organizations that we have in our community here, whether you're a financial institution or like SBDC or COPAL or ACLA, here's another resource that you could offer to businesses and entrepreneurs that they exist here in our community. Let me see here. There is
a follow-up to my question about
yes.
is there a sense of when you work with some financial institutions like banks or something, you get a more affordable loan, more better loan for your clients, for your stakeholders?
We get a loan with similar or equivalent interest rates to what is available on the market as a whole. So our focus is developing within a certain community, much like the way that a credit union has a certain community that they focus on. So then these financial institutions, we work with them to get low interest loans and then pass that on to our clients. So we're doing more of the underwriting on these loans, but we're keeping them at a similar rate to what they would get at a traditional bank. And something I should point out that last year, I believe, we directly funded 44 businesses to the tune of around $4 million total. And year over year, that's been continuously growing.
I believe, Al, you did put a question on the chat about in terms of staffing for LEDC, like how many members?
Yeah, that was answered already on the
That was answered already.
20 people apparently. There's 20 staff.
20 staff, 9 nationalities represented that I can think of off the top of my head, which makes it a really fun place. It's a linguistically rich place to work in Spanish because you get all of these different words and dialects. To me, it's just blowing my mind. I'm having a lot of fun.
I bet your potlucks are awesome.
My what?
Your potlucks.
You don't even understand. It's the best. We have team-based community lunches all the time. Anytime there's a celebration, there's always something to celebrate. Everybody brings in. In fact, you know what's even nice about that you mentioned that slide when I showed the graduates in May from our May business course. We had a graduation ceremony and we catered our own. We brought in our own stuff from our staff. And then the graduates, many of the graduates, as is within the culture, brought their own dishes to share with everybody, with the rest of the graduates and their families. And it was fun. We had a formal graduation ceremony that ended up a party.
Yeah. Sounds amazing.
There was a comment and a question from Amanda from the Rochester Area Foundation about because once we go through the recording and the episode, we usually share the PowerPoint slides. She would like to get the names of the businesses that you've mentioned throughout the presentation or links to their websites, so I can include in the email. So we will do that, Amanda. I also think
and I will send you a new version of the presentation because I had an error in the one that I sent you. I said 182,000 Latino farmers and it's 112,000. So I've changed that in this presentation. Of which I can't even remember if I said this in the presentation now, but of the 112,000 farmers in the state of Minnesota, only 650 identify as Latino.
wow.
And you think of there's a large percentage of Latinos that work as agricultural workers, but they haven't made their way in because the average farm size in Minnesota is 370, 375 acres, and it's on big commodities crops like wheat, corn, soy. But rather, there are, I think, 3,000 small like vegetable and fruit farms within Minnesota, which tend to have a higher percentage of Latinos, and they can get by on 2 acres on some of those things. I'm just full of information right now. I'm sorry. I get it.
No, this is very helpful. There was a question and it was answered by your colleague, Peter, but I'll read it out for our audience who will watch the episode or the recording later on. The question was from Amanda as well. It's, is there a business directory that is accessible to the public so that we can support these Latinx owned businesses, operated businesses? And your colleague answered, not yet. We just have implemented a CRM that will power a business directory.
That's exactly what I would have said.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks to Caitlin for answering the question. There was also a comment from Juliana from Collider. Collider is a nonprofit organization that does support early stage entrepreneurs, and also they provide services in Spanish. I would love to see LEDC to come and maybe host a workshop here, and maybe Julie and Juliana, if you could host that at the business bio building, where we could see you connect with the local resources that we have, Collider and SPDC, and also ACLA. Miriam's comment, I'm going to read it. ACLA offers support too in partnership with SPDC with entrepreneurs in Spanish. So, and I think our community could benefit from the free workshops that you have mentioned, and they're virtual, correct?
Our initial workshops are currently in person.
Okay.
However, I think it's something would be interesting to talk about, perhaps hosting an in-person workshop down in your neck of the woods. I mean, I'm so excited about what's going on in Rochester, in that part of the state anyway. And I love to get out and share what we do with communities that maybe can't drive their way into St. Paul for an afternoon. So that'd be something I'd really like to talk about.
Yeah, I think all the organizations that I named here, Peter, from the Rochester community can be can offer a great space for a hub, so where you could come down instead of our community members and businesses come
Right.
up to the city.
Yes.
So there is an opportunity for partnership. I see a question from Samuel. Any advice or suggestions for how to engage Latino business owners with programs or events?
I mean, number one is ask. And I think a lot of folks will sometimes ignore or skip over certain businesses to invite to an event. It's like, oh, they're not going to be interested, or they're not going to stand what I'm going to say. Like, number one is, yeah, get out there and ask and help attend their events and have other folks attend your events. And the more we get together and spend time together, the more likely we're all going to be able to share together. That's my basic. I mean, otherwise we can come and sing and dance and have some fun and make a little party. People always like that too.
And as I'm still scrolling and looking for more questions, one question that popped as you're sharing your presentation, Peter, was BIPOC businesses overall struggle to continue to be open. How can our community be able to help BIPOC-owned businesses, and specifically today, Latino and Hispanic-owned businesses? How can we retain them? How can we keep them in the community so we don't lose them? It's very often to see a business opens up and then in a couple of years they disappear, and then another business opens up. How can we retain these businesses?
By patronizing them. And you look at the history of the decline of small towns throughout the United States, and we're looking at the kind of the Walmart effect, right? And you look at these small towns in the early 90s, that their downtowns were thriving, and by the end of the decade, they were mostly cleared out because we can go to Walmart, and if I want to get some chapstick, maybe it's 15 cents cheaper for me at Walmart. But that's money that's not going to stay in the community. And so I would ask people to really support their local businesses, and instead of maybe going to Chi-Chi's or something for your Fiesta Mexicana platter, like go to your local restaurant and get comida de verdad, get some real food, like support those people because their kids go to school here. The owner of that business, attends worships in your community and buys supplies from the local hardware store. So number one is to support those communities. And then number two is to share that those businesses exist with other folks. Maybe they don't know. And so because Walmart has a much higher advertising budget than Sol Azteca does.
How, I believe you have a comment.
Yeah, I put this in the chat, but I wanted to kind of put voice to it. I said that, the idea of cultural expression and belonging is something that we always talk about and think about. And so I had shared that it is really wonderful to see how your work weaves economic mobility with that cultural expression and belonging, where folks who are coming from different spaces and places, whether it's through farming or the types of businesses that they open, are able to authentically show up but also make a living and thrive and grow. And those are all the subtle cues that we always talk about in communities that allow new folks to feel like this is a place for me, right?
Yes.
This is the place that I am welcome to. So thank you for that.
Oh, no, you're welcome. And that's from the very beginning of after we had Luis Garzon here in 1886, that a lot of Tejano and Mexican workers would kind of in the itinerant would come up and work on farms here in Minnesota. And so by, let's say, about 100 years ago, there were 5,000 to 7,000 Latino individuals in the state, but oftentimes they were not rooted because of the systemic barriers that were there, or because hey, this work's only here for 3 months, and now we're going to shift down to Kansas City for a while. And so it's really important to me to get those deep roots within the community and have multiple generations living, growing, and thriving in our state. That's how we all do better, and that's how we all get better food, we get better culture, we deal with each other in a much more reasonable fashion.
Thank you. I know that the focus of our session today, Peter, is on entrepreneurs and how LEDC offers services to entrepreneurs and business owners and businesses. Do you offer support to nonprofits? Do you offer support for just on a personal level for members of the Latino and Hispanic community in Minnesota? Since you did touch on loans and the CDFI, is there any plans in the future to work on supporting mortgages? Because we know Minnesota has one of the largest disparities for BIPOC home ownership. Are you looking into tapping into that market at all in the future?
It's something to think about in the future. It's not on our immediate menu, or not on the next menu of changes we're going to have coming out. But it is, you're right, the homeownership disparities are marked and sad amongst many different communities. And so that is something that even if we as an organization aren't internally able to support, we would love to be able to partner with an organization to help that happen, because this is all interconnected. All of health, economics, education, understanding, these are all interconnected elements to make for a more prosperous and rich community.
Absolutely. And does anyone in our attendees has any comments or any reflections that they would like to share? Oh, I do see a comment from Sadie. I'm gonna read it quickly here. Sadie says, I work at the intersection of conservation, environmental management, and public engagement. A great report came out recently highlighting the water quality concerns, perspectives and values of Latinx Hispanic communities along the Mississippi River. And she said she's curious to know how many small local conservation service providers are Hispanic Latinx owned, and how they came to be, their challenges, and how natural resource policies and programs impact them, how to make sure they know about rulemaking. But yeah, curious if there are known barriers we could address to better support Hispanic Latinx entrepreneurs interested in greater natural resources world, as you tapped into the agriculture earlier.
I don't know offhand of any environmentally focused nonprofit or environmentally focused organizations that we work with directly. I think many of us understand the disparities in air quality and soil quality of folks that live in different communities throughout the states. And so that's something worth addressing, but directly from our organization, I don't know.
Sadie, do you have any additional, I saw you pop on your camera. If you have any additional comment or reflections.
Thank you so much for being here today. And sorry for the very long text that's in there. But I've been thinking about just who the service providers are within like natural resources conservation. So whether it's construction or like ecological restoration, anything like that, a number of them are small local businesses. However, I don't see a lot of diversity among those business owners. And so I'm really curious about this intersection of entrepreneurship and helping folks get engaged, I guess, with the different possibilities and industries, and just like, how do we help people know that there even are needs and possibilities for starting a business or getting involved? Just because that report that just came out showed that particularly Hispanic and Latinx communities are even more significantly impacted by, because of their relationship to water, and more concerned about water quality.
Yeah, that's a wonderful piece of information to think about. One of the things that we are looking to put on our next menu is sort of a green initiative and helping fund businesses find more environmentally responsible ways to conduct their business, whether that be from hiring an organization to do an environmental study. And it'd be great if we had Spanish-speaking members within that gremio, what do you call that? Within that area of expertise. And then, of course, by funding, like, hey, no more styrofoam in your restaurant, or we're going to convert to biofuel something. So this is something that in the fairly close future, or we'll just call it the midterm, that yes, we are going to be working on developing a fund for specific green initiatives.
Perfect. Thank you, Sadie. And thank you so much, Peter Majerle, for being here with us today and sharing this awesome presentation. And we can't wait to see more of LEDC here in our community. And I hope all the organizations that they joined us today in the equity series or watching the recording later on YouTube, please connect with LEDC, the Latino Economic Development Center, to identify ways of collaboration and how can we create like a whole playbook or a toolbox of different tools that we could offer to our communities and Hispanic and Latino entrepreneurs in Rochester. Thank you so much, Peter.
Thank you for the opportunity. This has been a tremendous amount of fun. I'm pleased to make your virtual acquaintance, and I look forward to meeting each and every one of you face to face sometime in the near future.
Thank you. And then quickly, before everybody hops off, I just want to remind everyone of some local events that they're happening soon. ACLA is hosting the Latino Fest at the Chateau Theater in downtown Rochester this Saturday. It's going to be a family-friendly event where you get to see performances, music, enjoy some food, and learn more about our local Rochester community. And as you've probably seen in the chat, I did not forget to mention this, Julie from SBDC, that SBDC is hosting a series of classes in Spanish beginning
Monday.
14th of September all the way to October 7th. Yes, and
Yeah.
it's go
I
ahead.
do have the flyer in Spanish and all of the individual flyers if you guys are looking for them.
Perfect. Feel free to send them to me and I will share them with the email group that I have here for the equity series. So SBDC is going to be offering some really awesome classes for celebrating the National Hispanic Heritage Month. And then just did not want everyone to forget that DMC is hosting the annual meeting. We're going to be hosting the annual meeting event at 2 Discovery on the 19th of September from 4 to 7 p.m. Feel free to come and join us. There is an Eventbrite link where you could register so you get to know more about DMC initiatives. There is food, there is opportunity for you to network and connect. Also, on October 2nd, the Coalition for Rochester Area Housing in partnership with DMC, the FDIC, and the OCC, we're hosting an event for the banking community on closing the housing gaps in Southeast Minnesota. It's also available on Eventbrite. Feel free to register for the event. And then finally, I want to just share that Cradle to Career will be hosting their annual education summit October 9th, which is the same date of when we will have our next Equity Series episode. So it's going to be a busy fall, everyone. So until we see you next month with a new topic and new presenter, I hope you all have an awesome time, an awesome day. Thank you so much.